The courtroom fell silent the moment the little girl stood up. She was 7 years old, maybe 8, wearing a yellow dress 2 sizes too big for her. The kind of dress a child wears when someone who loves her tries their best from a thrift store rack. Her hair was tied back with a rubber band instead of a ribbon. Her shoes were scuffed at the toes. And in a room full of men in tailored suits and a judge draped in black robes, she should have been the least important person alive. But she had just said something that made 200 people forget how to breathe. "Let my daddy go," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "and I'll make you walk again." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then someone laughed. A short, ugly bark of laughter from the back of the gallery. Another followed. Then another, until the whole room seemed to shake with it. Lawyers snickering behind their folders, spectators covering their mouths, a bailiff shaking his head at the sheer absurdity of it. Because the man she was speaking to, Judge Harold Whittaker, had not walked in 11 years. He sat behind his tall bench in a wheelchair that everyone in that city knew about. His legs had been dead since the night of an accident that had nearly killed him, and there was not a doctor in the country who could change that. So when a barefoot poor little girl in a yellow dress promised to make him walk, the courtroom did what cruel rooms always do to the powerless. It laughed at her. But the judge did not laugh. His name was Harold Whittaker, and he was known throughout the district as the coldest man ever to hold a gavel. In 11 years on the bench, no one had seen him smile. No one had seen him show mercy. The lawyers called him the stone behind his back, because trying to move him was like arguing with granite. He had put more people in prison than any judge in the state's history, and he was proud of it. Rules were rules, evidence was evidence, feelings were noise, and Harold Whittaker did not listen to noise. Which was why the little girl's father, Daniel Bennett, was about to go to prison for 12 years. Daniel Bennett sat at the defendant's table, with his wrists in chains and his head bowed. He was a thin man, 34 years old, with the kind of tired eyes that come from working 2 jobs and still not having enough. Until 3 months ago, he'd been a junior accountant at a company called Halcyon Capital Group, a glittering investment firm that occupied the top 9 floors of the tallest building downtown. He had been good at his job, careful, honest. He had never so much as taken a pen home from the office, and now the prosecution said he had stolen $4 million. The evidence, they said, was airtight. The money had been moved from client accounts through a series of transfers, all authorised by Daniel's login credentials, all executed from Daniel's computer, all time-stamped in the dead of night when the office was empty. There were logs, there were digital signatures. There was a paper trail so clean and so complete that the defence attorney, a public defender named Ms. Callahan, who was handling 40 other cases that same month, had barely bothered to fight it. She had advised Daniel to take a plea. He had refused. He kept saying the same thing to anyone who would listen, which was almost no one. "I wasn't even there that night. I have an alibi. Why won't anyone check my alibi?" But the alibi wasn't in the file, and in Harold Whittaker's courtroom, if it wasn't in the file, it didn't exist. The trial had taken 4 days. On the morning of the 5th, the judge had called the room to order to deliver the sentence. Daniel's daughter, Lily, had been sitting in the second row beside her grandmother, so small that her feet didn't touch the floor. And when the judge lifted his gavel and began to speak the words that would take her father away for 12 years, Lily Bennett did the only thing a child could think to do. She stood up and she made her impossible promise. "Order," the judge said, and his voice cut through the laughter like a blade through cloth. The room went quiet. He looked down at the little girl over the rims of his glasses, and his grey eyes were as flat and cold as a frozen lake. "Young lady, do you understand where you are?" "Yes, sir," Lily said. "I'm in the place where they decide what's true." Something flickered in the judge's face. It was gone almost before it appeared. "This is a court of law, not a playground. Your father has been found guilty. There is nothing you can say, and nothing you can do, that will change what the evidence has proven. Sit down before I have you removed." "The evidence is wrong," Lily said. The prosecutor rose smoothly from his table. His name was Marcus Reed, and he was everything Daniel Bennett was not: polished, expensive, confident. A man whose suit probably cost more than Daniel earned in a month. He had a jaw like a movie villain and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Your Honour," he said, spreading his hands as if he were reasonable and the entire universe agreed with him. "I sympathise with the child, truly I do. but we cannot allow the sentencing of a convicted thief to be interrupted by theatrics. I ask that the girl be removed and the sentence be delivered as scheduled." "Daddy didn't steal the money," Lily said, and now her voice was rising, filling the room, and something in it made even Marcus Reed pause. "Somebody else took it and made it look like him. And you know it. You know it because you're the one who did it." The gallery gasped. Marcus Reed's smile flickered for just a fraction of a second. A crack in a mask, there and gone. But the judge saw it. Harold Whittaker had spent 11 years reading the faces of guilty men, and he had just seen something in the prosecutor's face that he had not expected to see. "That is a slanderous accusation from a child," Reed snapped, and his voice was suddenly harder. "Your Honour, I must insist." "Bailiff," the judge said quietly. "Let her speak." You could have heard a pin drop. The bailiff halfway out of his seat froze. Marcus Reed stared at the bench as if the judge had spoken in a foreign language. In 11 years, Harold Whittaker had never once stopped a proceeding to let a child speak. He had never once shown a flicker of interest in anything but the file in front of him. "Your Honour," Reed began. "I said let her speak." The judge turned his cold eyes on the little girl. "You have 2 minutes. If you cannot tell me something worth hearing, I will finish this sentence, and your father will go to prison, and you will have wasted the only chance you will ever get. Do you understand what I am giving you?" "Yes, sir." "Then speak, and do not waste my time with promises about my legs." Lily swallowed. Her small hands were shaking. But she lifted her chin, and she looked the coldest judge in the state directly in the eye. And she said the thing that changed everything. "On the night they said my daddy stole the money, he wasn't at the office. He was at St. Michael's Children's Hospital. With me, because I was dying." The room went very still. "I have something wrong with my heart," Lily said. "The doctors call it arrhythmia. Sometimes it stops beating right, and I fall down and I can't breathe. That night it happened bad. Grandma called the ambulance and Daddy left work early. Everybody at the office saw him leave. And he came to the hospital and he held my hand the whole entire night. He didn't let go, not once. Not even to get coffee or go to the bathroom. He was scared I was going to die, so he held my hand and he sang to me. He sang the song about the moon that Mommy used to sing before she went to heaven. And a nurse saw. Lots of nurses saw. There's cameras in the hallway. There's papers you sign when you go in. It's all there, all of it." She took a breath. "So how could my daddy be typing on his computer at the office in the middle of the night stealing $4 million when he was holding my hand at the hospital? And I never let go." Nobody spoke. Ms. Callahan, the exhausted public defender who had barely lifted her head in 4 days, suddenly sat up straight. Her mouth opened. "Your Honour," she said slowly, this is the first I'm hearing of a hospital admission. If the defendant was admitted to St. Michael's that night, then the transactions attributed to him." "Objection," Marcus Reed said, and there was something desperate underneath his smooth voice now. "This is an obvious fabrication. A child's story invented at the last possible moment to manipulate the emotions of this court. There is no evidence." "Which hospital?" the judge interrupted. "St. Michael's," Lily said. "The children's one on 5th Street, 4th floor, room 412. I was there 4 days. The nurse who helped me the most was named Rosa. She had a butterfly clip in her hair, and she gave me great popsicles." The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he set down his gavel, the gavel he had lifted to end this man's freedom, and he laced his fingers together on the bench. "Mr. Reed," he said, "did anyone verify the defendant's location on the night of the transactions?" "Your Honour, the transactions were made using the defendant's credentials from the defendant's workstation. His physical location is irrelevant. He could have automated the transfers, or accessed the system remotely." "That is not what I asked." The judge's voice dropped, and it was terrible in its quietness. "I asked whether anyone verified where the man was, whether anyone checked the hospitals, whether anyone pulled the security footage from Halcyon's own building to see who was sitting at that desk at 2 o'clock in the morning. Answer the question, counsellor. Did anyone check?" Marcus Reed opened his mouth, closed it, and in that silence everyone in the room understood the answer. No one had checked. "This court is in recess," Judge Whittaker announced, and the entire gallery erupted. He banged the gavel once hard, cutting through the noise. "I want the complete admission records from St. Michael's Children's Hospital for the night in question on my desk within the hour. I want the name and duty log of every nurse who who worked the fourth floor. And I want the raw security footage from the Halcyon Capitol building. Not the summary, not the report. The actual footage for the night in question. Mr. Reed, if this child is telling the truth, then someone in this case has committed a fraud far greater than any theft, and I promise you I will find out who. He turned to the bailiff. Take the girl and her grandmother to my chambers. Bring them water, and bring the child something to eat. She looks like she hasn't eaten all day. Then Harold Whittaker did something no one in that courtroom had ever seen him do in 11 years. He looked at the little girl in the yellow dress and he almost smiled. The records arrived in 43 minutes. They told a story that made the blood drain from Marcus Reed's face. Lily Bennett had been admitted to St. Michael's at 6:52 p.m. on the night in question, presenting with cardiac arrhythmia. Her father, Daniel Bennett, had signed the intake forms at 7:04 p.m. He had been logged as a visitor continuously until the following morning. The nurse's notes from the overnight shift, written in a nurse's careful hand, described a father who refused to leave his daughter's bedside, who declined the cot offered to him, who held the child's hand through the night and sang to her softly to keep her calm. The nurse who wrote those notes had signed them R. Delgado, R.N. Rosa, the nurse with the butterfly clip. And then there was the security footage from Halcyon Capitol. Judge Whittaker watched it himself, in his chambers, with his reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead and his jaw tight. The footage showed the accounting floor at 1:47 a.m. on the night of the theft. It showed a figure walking down the darkened corridor, sitting down at Daniel Bennett's desk, switching on the monitor and beginning to type. The person worked for nearly 2 hours, moving money through a dozen accounts. And near the end, as the figure stood up to leave, they glanced, just for a moment, just by accident, up at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. It was not Daniel Bennett. It was a man with a jaw like a movie villain and a smile that never reached his eyes, even when he thought no one was watching. The judge froze the frame. He looked at that face for a long, long time, and then he called for his bailiff and said, in a voice of terrifying calm, "Bring me the prosecutor, and do not let him leave this building." But Marcus Reed was already gone. The recess had given him 20 minutes, and 20 minutes was all a guilty man needed. By the time the bailiff reached the prosecution's table, Reed had gathered his files and slipped out a side door, and his phone was already pressed to his ear as he hurried down the marble corridor toward the parking garage. "We have a problem," he said into the phone, his voice low and urgent. "The Bennett case. The little girl. She had an alibi, a hospital. The old man is pulling the security footage." The voice on the other end of the line was smooth and rich and utterly without warmth. It belonged to a man named Vincent Hale, and Vincent Hale sat on the top floor of the Halcyon Capitol building in an office the size of a tennis court. "You told me this was handled, Marcus." "It was handled. The public defender didn't fight it. The file was clean. Nobody was supposed to look twice. And yet someone is looking twice. It's the girl and Whittaker. He's not letting it go." There was a pause. When Vincent Hale spoke again, his voice was even quieter, and somehow that was worse. "Then you will make him let it go. That accountant was becoming a problem. He asked too many questions about the Meridian accounts. Do you remember what those questions could have exposed? Do you remember what is buried in those accounts? If Daniel Bennett walks out of that courtroom and starts talking to investigators, everything we have built for the last 15 years comes down. Everything. And you, Marcus, will be the first one buried under it." Reed reached his car, his hands shaking as he unlocked it. "What do you want me to do?" "Discredit the nurse," Vincent Hale said. "Discredit the footage. And if you cannot do that," a long cold pause, "then find someone else to blame. You have 24 hours. The line went dead. Marcus Reed sat in his expensive car in the dark of the parking garage, and for the first time in a very long time, he was afraid. Back in his chambers, Judge Harold Whittaker was not afraid. He was angry. He was angry in a way he had not allowed himself to be in 11 years. Not since the accident. He sat in his wheelchair with the hospital records spread across his desk, and the frozen frame of Marcus Reed's face glowing on the monitor, and he felt something he thought had died in him long ago. He felt like a judge again. The little girl was sitting across from him, a half-eaten sandwich in her hands. watching him with those enormous, serious eyes. Her grandmother sat beside her, an old woman whose hands were folded in prayer. "Lily," the judge said. "That's your name, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. Lily Bennett." "Lily, how did you know?" He gestured vaguely at the room, the case, all of it. "How did you know it was the prosecutor? How could a child possibly know a thing like that?" Lily set down her sandwich. "I didn't know for sure," she admitted, "but Daddy told me. Before the trial, he told me that a few days before the police came, he found something at work, some money that was going into an account that wasn't real. He told his boss, and his boss said don't worry about it. But then Daddy kept worrying because it was a lot of money, and it didn't make sense. And then a week later, the police came and said Daddy was the thief. Daddy said it was like somebody was punishing him for asking questions. And when I saw that man," she pointed at the frozen face on the screen, "that prosecutor, the way he smiled when he thought Daddy was going to prison, I knew. He smiled like he won something. But you only smile like that if you were playing a game the whole time. Daddy wasn't playing a game. Daddy was just scared, so the man who was playing the game had to be the bad one." The judge stared at her. "And the promise?" he asked softly. "About my legs, why did you say that?" Lily looked at the floor. "I'm sorry, I know it was silly. But my mommy, before she went to heaven, she used to tell me that when you do something good, something really, really good, when it's hard and everybody says don't do it, that God gives you a little miracle back. And I looked at you sitting up there in your chair, and you looked so sad and so alone, like nobody in the whole world had made you happy in a long time. And I thought if I could make you do the right thing, if I could wake up the good part of you, then maybe the miracle would be for you too. Maybe that would be your little miracle back. I didn't mean magic. I just meant, I don't know what I meant. I just wanted my daddy back." For a long moment, the coldest judge in the state could not speak, because 11 years ago, before the accident that took his legs, Harold Whittaker had been a different man. He had been an investigator, a crusader, a judge who was building a case against a corrupt financial empire that stretched its fingers into every corner of the city's power. He had been close, so close to bringing it down. And then one rainy night, a truck had run a red light and crushed his car against a bridge abutment, and he had woken up in a hospital bed, unable to feel his legs. The police had called it an accident. He had believed them. He had given up the investigation. He had let the fire in him go out, and for 11 years he had sat on his bench, applying rules without feeling, following papers without questioning, because questioning had cost him his legs, and he had learned his lesson. Or so he had thought. He looked at the little girl in the yellow dress, and he understood something that turned his blood to ice. "Lily," he said slowly, "the company your father worked for, Halcyon Capital. Do you know the name of the man who runs it?" "No, sir." But Harold Whittaker knew. He had known for 11 years. Vincent Hale. The same name that had been at the centre of the investigation that ended when his car hit that bridge. It had never been an accident, and this had never been about a little girl's father. This was the same monster, and it had finally, after 11 years, walked right back into his courtroom. "Get me Nurse Rosa Delgado," the judge said to his bailiff, and his voice had changed. It had steel in it now. "Get me the head of building security at Halcyon. Get me every case Marcus Reed has prosecuted in the last 10 years, and cross-reference them against Halcyon Capital and its subsidiaries, and put a protective detail on this family, effective immediately. Nobody comes near this child. Nobody." "Your Honour," the bailiff asked, "you think they're in danger?" Harold Whittaker looked at Lily Bennett, this fearless little girl who had walked into the lion's den in a thrift store dress and made the lions afraid. "I think," he said, "that we are all in danger now, but some fires are worth burning for." Nurse Rosa Delgado testified the next morning. She was a small woman with kind eyes and, indeed, a butterfly clip in her hair, and she told the courtroom exactly what she had written in her notes. She remembered Daniel Bennett. She remembered him because in 15 years of nursing she had rarely seen a father so devoted. She remembered how he had held his daughter's hand through the seizures, how he had sung to her, how he had wept quietly at 3 a.m, when the little girl's heart had stuttered, and the monitors had screamed and the crash team had come running. He had not left the floor, not once. She would stake her career, her reputation, her life on it. "And were you ever asked to give this testimony before now?" the judge asked. Yes, sir, Rosa said. A detective came to the hospital about 2 weeks after that night. I told him everything. He wrote it all down, and then... She frowned. And then nothing. Nobody ever called me. There was no trial, no lawyer, no nothing. I thought maybe the man had been let go. I never dreamed he'd been convicted. If I'd known, I'd have come forward. I'd have shouted it from the rooftops. You were interviewed by a detective, the judge repeated slowly. And your statement was written down, and then it vanished from the case file. I suppose it did. Judge Whittaker turned to the empty chair where Marcus Reed should have been sitting. Reed had not appeared that morning. His office reported that he had not come in. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment, when officers were sent to check on him, was empty. Closet cleaned out. Papers gone. A half-packed suitcase abandoned on the bed as if he had left in a hurry. But he had left one thing behind. In his rush, in his panic, Marcus Reed had left his office computer logged in, and the court's forensic technicians, working through the night on the judge's orders, had pulled everything from it. What they found made even the veteran investigators go pale. It was not one case. It was not two. Over 11 years, Marcus Reed had prosecuted at least 19 people who fit the same pattern. 19 ordinary, honest, competent people who had worked for Halcyon Capital or its network of subsidiaries, who had noticed something they weren't supposed to notice, who had asked a question they weren't supposed to ask. And every single one of them had been convicted of a crime they almost certainly did not commit. Embezzlement, fraud, theft. Their evidence appeared out of nowhere. Their witnesses were suppressed. Their alibis vanished from their files. And once they were branded criminals, once they were locked away, nothing they said afterward mattered to anyone. Their credibility was destroyed. Their warnings became the ravings of convicts. It was a machine. A beautiful, terrible machine for destroying inconvenient people, and Marcus Reed was one of its gears. Daniel Bennett was meant to be victim number 20. He had been stopped by a 7-year-old girl in a yellow dress. Your Honour, said the lead detective. A greying woman named Captain Ford who had been pulled onto the case at Whittaker's insistence. This goes far beyond one crooked prosecutor. To suppress witnesses, to plant evidence, to alter case files across 19 prosecutions. Reed couldn't have done that alone. He'd need people inside the police, inside the crime lab, maybe inside the courts. This is an organisation, and Halcyon Capital is at the centre of it. I know, said Harold Whittaker. Sir, I know, he said again, and he told her. For the first time in 11 years, he told someone about the investigation he had abandoned, about the case he had been building against Vincent Hale, about the rainy night and the truck that ran the red light, and the 11 years he had spent believing it was bad luck. Captain Ford listened, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You think they tried to kill you, she said. I think they succeeded in killing the part of me that was dangerous to them, the judge said. For 11 years, I stopped asking questions. That was all they needed. But a child asked a question I couldn't ignore, and now I remember who I used to be. He straightened in his chair. Captain, I want you to understand something. They're going to try to make this go away. They have done it before, and they are very good at it. They will offer someone up as a sacrifice. My guess is Marcus Reed. They'll make him the scapegoat, claim he acted alone, out of greed, a single bad apple. And the real architecture stays hidden. We cannot let that happen. We move on all of it at once, or we move on none of it. Do you understand? I understand. Then let's build the case they thought they buried 11 years ago. They found Marcus Reed 3 days later. A jogger discovered his body in the reservoir at the edge of the city. The official report, filed with suspicious speed, ruled it a suicide. A disgraced prosecutor who couldn't face the consequences of his crimes. But the medical examiner, a careful and honest man, noted something in his findings that the report tried to bury. There were bruises on Reed's wrists, deep and dark, in the exact pattern of a man who had been held down. There was a confession note in Reed's handwriting, but the ink analysis showed it had been written under pressure, the letters shaky and uneven, the hand not steady as a man's hand is when he chooses his own ending, but trembling as a man's hand trembles when someone is standing over him. Marcus Reed had not killed himself, he had been silenced. Vincent Hale had eliminated the one man who could connect him directly to the machine, and for a moment it seemed as if it had worked, as if the trail had gone cold The witness was dead, and the whole terrible structure would sink back into the shadows. But Marcus Reed, it turned out, had not been a fool. He had been a coward, and cowards prepare escape routes. Weeks before his death, sensing that the walls were beginning to close in, he had done the one thing that guilty men do when they are more afraid of their partners than of the law. He had made insurance. He had recorded everything. A courier arrived at the courthouse the morning of the reopened trial, carrying a package addressed to Judge Harold Whittaker. Inside was a small hard drive and a handwritten note that said only, "If you are reading this, I'm already dead. This is everything. Do what I was too much of a coward to do." The hard drive contained 15 years of Marcus Reed's secret records, recordings of phone calls with Vincent Hale, in which the two men discussed which employees needed to be handled and how, detailed instructions on how to alter case files and suppress witnesses, bank records showing millions of dollars flowing from Halcyon's phantom accounts into Reed's pockets, and into the pockets of a police captain named Douglas Kerr, who had overseen every one of the 19 tainted investigations. And a list, a long careful list, of every powerful person who had fed at the trough of Vincent Hale's empire. Businessmen, politicians, a sitting state senator, a judge on the appeals court. And at the very top of the list, circled in red, was the truth about a rainy night 11 years ago. A payment. An order. The name of the man who had driven the truck that put Harold Whittaker in his wheelchair. It had been Vincent Hale all along. The courtroom on the final day was the fullest anyone had ever seen it. Word had spread, first as rumour, then as headline, then as a wildfire that no amount of money could put out. Reporters lined the walls. Families of the 19 wrongfully convicted crowded the gallery, some of them fresh from the prisons where they had languished for crimes they never committed, released in the frantic days as the case unravelled. And in the second row, in a brand new dress that actually fit, sat Lily Bennett, holding her father's hand. Daniel Bennett was a free man now. The charges had been dropped, his name cleared, his innocence declared in the strongest terms the court could offer. But he had insisted on being there for the end. "I need to see it," he had told his daughter. "I need to watch it happen, because of you." Judge Harold Whittaker called the court to order. "Today," he said, and his voice carried to every corner of that silent room, "we are not here merely to correct a single injustice. We are here to expose a machine that has ground up innocent lives for 15 years. A machine built to protect the powerful and destroy anyone honest enough to threaten them. I have spent 11 years of my life as a small, willing part of the silence that let this machine run. I intend to spend the rest of it tearing that machine apart, piece by piece, name by name. And I will begin," he said, lifting his gaze to the well-dressed man sitting rigid in the front row, "with the man who built it. Vincent Hale approached the bench." Vincent Hale rose slowly. He was tall and silver-haired and impeccable, a man accustomed to owning every room he entered, and he didn't look like a man who was afraid. "Your Honour," he said smoothly, "I've come here voluntarily as a concerned citizen to offer whatever cooperation I can, but I must say I'm baffled. My company operates entirely within the law. If a rogue employee committed crimes, that is a matter for—" "Then explain the phantom accounts," the judge said. "Explain the $11 million routed through shell companies that do not exist. Explain the payments to Marcus Reed, who was found dead in the reservoir last week. Explain the payments to Captain Douglas Kerr, who is being arrested in the hallway of this building as I speak." The colour drained from Hale's face. "This is your voice," the judge continued, and he nodded to a technician who pressed a button. Marcus Reed's recordings filled the courtroom. Hale's own cold voice, unmistakable, discussing the destruction of one honest life after another. The gallery gasped. Somewhere a woman began to cry. Vincent Hale stood frozen as 15 years of his sins echoed off the marble walls. "That could be fabricated," he said, but his voice had lost its silk. "Manufactured. You have no proof." "I have your business partner's records," the judge said. "I have your bank transfers. I have the security footage of your own prosecutor sitting at Daniel Bennett's desk. I have 19 wrongfully convicted men and women who will testify against you." He leaned forward, and now the cold in his eyes was not the cold of indifference, but the cold of a hunter who has finally cornered his prey. "And I have one thing more, Mr. Hale. Something personal. Something that took me 11 years to learn." He set a single sheet of paper on the bench. I have the name of the man you paid to run a truck through a red light on the night of March 14th, 11 years ago, the night you tried to kill a judge who was asking too many questions. You did not kill me, Vincent. You only broke my legs, and you should have finished the job, because a broken man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of man there is. The courtroom exploded. Vincent Hale was arrested where he stood, along with Captain Douglas Kerr, along with a state senator named Kavanaugh, and 3 others whose names had been circled on Marcus Reed's list. The machine that had run in the dark for 15 years came apart in a single afternoon, dragged into the light by the evidence of a dead coward and the courage of a living child. In the weeks that followed, all 19 wrongful convictions were overturned. 19 innocent people walked free. Their names were cleared, their records erased, and the state, for the first time in its history, offered not just apologies but full restitution for every day they had spent behind bars for crimes they did not commit. And when it was over, when the last order had been signed and the courtroom had begun to empty, Judge Harold Whittaker called Daniel Bennett and his daughter to approach the bench. "Mr. Bennett," he said, and his voice was no longer cold at all, "I owe you an apology, not just for this case. For 11 years of being the kind of judge who would have sent you away without a second thought. I stopped believing that truth mattered. I stopped believing that a single person could change anything. Your daughter reminded me that I was wrong." Then he looked at Lily. "You told me," he said quietly, "that if I did the right thing, I would walk again. Do you remember?" "Yes, sir," Lily whispered. "The doctors will tell you my legs are dead," Harold Whittaker said. "They will tell you it is medically impossible for me to walk. And they are right." He gripped the arms of his wheelchair. "But there are things doctors cannot measure. When that truck hit my car 11 years ago, it did more than break my spine. It broke my will. It broke my belief that anything I did could matter. And a broken will is its own kind of paralysis, the kind that keeps a man sitting still even when his heart is screaming at him to stand." His knuckles whitened. "You did not heal my legs, Lily Bennett, but you healed the thing that had kept me from even trying." And then, in front of a courtroom of 200 people, with sweat breaking out on his forehead and every tendon in his body straining, Harold Whittaker planted his hands and pushed himself up. He rose an inch, then 2. His arms shook, his face contorted with effort and pain. And then, impossibly, unbelievably, the coldest judge in the state stood, swaying, trembling, gripping the bench for dear life, but standing, on legs that had not held him in 11 years. The courtroom was utterly silent, and then it erupted in a sound that no one there would ever forget. He did not walk. Not that day. That would come later, slowly, through months of therapy that his doctors could not explain. A return of sensation, of movement, of function that the medical journals would eventually write about, with words like unprecedented and inexplicable. But on that day, in that room, he stood, and that was enough. Lily Bennett looked up at the standing judge with tears streaming down her small face, and she smiled the smile of a child who had always, somehow, known. "I told you," she whispered. 6 months later, in a ceremony broadcast across the entire state, Lily Bennett was awarded the highest civilian honour the court could bestow, for extraordinary courage, for unshakable faith, and for being the single spark that reignited justice when it had very nearly gone out forever. She wore a yellow dress. She had picked it herself. And Judge Harold Whittaker, standing at the podium with only a cane for support, said the words that the whole state would remember long after the trial and the arrests and the headlines had faded. "We like to believe," he said, "that justice is a machine, that it runs on rules and evidence and cold procedure, and that if we simply follow the rules, the right thing will happen on its own. But justice is not a machine. Justice is made of people, and people can be bought, and people can be broken, and people can grow so cold and so tired that they forget why they ever cared. I know this because I was one of those people for 11 years. He looked out at the sea of faces. But people can also do something a machine can never do. People can wake up. People can choose in a single moment to do the hard, right thing instead of the easy, wrong one. And sometimes, all it takes to wake a whole sleeping world is one small voice that refuses to be silent. He looked down at the little girl beside him. This child walked into the coldest courtroom in this state, wearing a dress that didn't fit, with no lawyer and no power, and nothing at all but the truth and the faith to speak it. 200 grown adults laughed at her. And she saved her father. She freed 19 innocent people. She toppled an empire of corruption 15 years in the making. And she made a broken old man believe he could stand again. His voice caught. So when they tell you that one person cannot change anything, when they tell you the powerful are untouchable, and the corrupt will always win, and the little people should keep their heads down and stay quiet, I want you to remember a 7-year-old girl in a yellow dress standing alone in a courtroom, refusing to sit down. He raised the medal. The walls did fall, Harold Whittaker said softly, and the truth did rise again, because a child was brave enough to say it out loud. And in the front row, holding her father's hand, Lily Bennett smiled, because she had always known that when you do the right thing, even the impossible finds a way to come true.